Greetings, Earthlings of YouTube. It's time to talk about the moon in the different houses, in the 12 houses, as portrayed by Mantreshwar in the classic Sanskrit astrology text, Phaladeepika. Let's take a look at his first statement. Ste Chandre Lagne Drita Tanurad Abrayurabhayo Balishto Lakshmivan Bhavati Viparitam Kshayagate. The moon in the first. If it is bright or waxing, you get a strong body, enduring vitality, fearlessness, strength, and opulence, and if it is dim or waning, the opposite. So, as we saw with the sun in the first house, when he talks about this planet in the first house, he mentions some of the conditions. Like, it's conditional. If the moon is like this, if the sun is in a certain sign in the first house, then you get this effect. But if it's in a different sign in the first house, then you get that effect. Similarly with the moon, it's drastic, and if it's bright, then you get A, and if it's dim, then you get the opposite of A. So, as I mentioned last week, he only mentions this in the first house, but it's part of the whole thing that you have to consider, and also for any house, and also that's the thing that people don't understand. When they open up an astrology book, cookbook, they think of it as like a cookbook or cut and paste kind of thing. What an astrology book really is like a bunch of Legos. It's not the finished product. You get the bits of interpretations out of the stock, basic things. It's like the way that nature uses atoms to build molecules, and then uses molecules to build organisms, like organs and tissues, and then uses those tissues and organs to build organisms, and then has those organisms build other things. So in the same way, you have these basic building blocks, like the moon in the first house will give you a strong body. That's a basic building block that you have to put together with a whole bunch of other building blocks. So the most important thing to see about how you're going to modify the building block is the other condition of whether or not the moon is Site or Kshaya, which means bright or dim, or it means waxing or waning. So there's the verdict is not always this, out. The jury is out on whether or not people usually mean waxing or bright. So some people will say if the moon is half full or more, half bright or more, then it's considered sita, or bright and good. So that would be anything from the 8th phase to the other 8th phase, from the waxing 8th to the waning 8th. Whereas if it's less than half, then it's dark. And other people will say if it's anything after the new moon up to the full moon, then that's waxing, literally, and anything from after the waxing, after the full down to the new, that's waning. So what I would suggest to do is, first of all, look at it in practice. And second of all, after looking at it in practice, my suggestion is you do both. So you can divide it into quarters. You can divide the moon's phases into quarters. So, for example, right after the moon is new, and when it's the new crescent, it has an element of brightness to it because it's waxing. But it's still in the dimmer half of the waxing, so it's a beneficial moon. But if it's in the next quarter, then it's even more bright. It's waxing and it's bright. And similarly, once it gets past the full moon, it's starting to wane, so it's getting an aspect of darkening, but it's not dark yet. And then when it's in the final quarter, you consider that the darkest. That's how I work with it. Okay, so that's a little bit of a tangential detail about how to deal with the moon's phase. But the overarching point is that you have to take the concept of this planet in this house will do this. You have to take that concept and blend it with the rest of the things that are important in the chart, starting with the rest of the things that are important about that planet. So here he identified the brightness, and previously when we did the sun in the houses, he identified the dignity or the sign, the way that the planet works in the sign. So you have to take those two things into consideration. That's why when you hear what he's going to say about the moon in the second, the moon in the third, the moon in the fourth, the moon in the fifth, the moon in the sixth, sometimes it's going to sound like, I have the moon in the sixth or the fifth or the fourth. It's not quite like that. Or other times it'll seem like, oh yeah, wow, how did he know? Because in some situations, the thing that he's saying matches with the context that you have. But in other situations, the thing that he's saying doesn't match with the context that you have. So when it happens to coincidentally match with your context, then the out-of-the-box description sounds perfectly right. And when it happens to coincidentally not match with your context, then the out-of-the-box description sounds kind of difficult to resonate with. All right? So bear that in mind. Any questions? Zena says, if my sun is at 1 degree Pisces and 24 degrees Pisces in my moon, is your moon new? This is a simple thing to tell how bright the moon is or how bright anything is. How far away is it from the sun? That's the simple rule. The further away anything is from the sun, the brighter it is. With the exception of Venus and Mercury, the maximum distance you can get is 180 degrees away. You're on a circle, so the furthest you can get away from something is 180 degrees away, the opposite side of the circle. The reason why Mercury and Venus are exceptions is because they have an interior orbit to the Earth, so they never get 180 degrees away. They have other maximums. Venus is close to 60, Mercury is close to 30, I forget the exact numbers. So, in your particular case, you got this, the moon is 23 degrees away from the sun. It's not, if it's 0 degrees away from the sun, then it's absolutely black. Can't see it. If it's 30 degrees away from the sun, it's starting to become visible. Just barely starting to become visible as a crescent. I'm gonna just try to entertain the questions that are on the topic, so that we stay on the topic. All right. So now let's get to the specifics of what he said. If the moon is in the first house, Lagna, then you get Dridha Tanu. Dridha means very firm. And Dridha also means enduring. And Tanu means body. So first house has a direct implication on the body, the physical reality. So get the moon there, then you get a healthy body. That's the first thing. A healthy body is the moon in the first house. And then Abhrayu. Abhrayu means your life will be long and auspicious. And it's not just life. When they say life, they also mean your vitality, and they also mean your focus, which is how you use your vitality. So if you have Abhrayu, which is longevity, then you'll also have good concentration. You'll have longevity in how you participate in anything. So if the moon is in the first house, you should have a strong mind as well as a healthy body. So you'll be able to concentrate. And abhayo, fearlessness. It's very interesting because fear is what is one of the big things that occupies the mind or the moon. So if you get the moon in a nice house at the first house, you shouldn't have fearlessness. You shouldn't have fearfulness. You shouldn't be fearful. Balishta, your body should be strong. So I said a strong body, and then I said strong. It seems a little redundant. So a healthy body, enduring vitality, fearlessness. Strength, balishta, but this balishta, that doesn't just mean physical strength. So it can mean when the moon is in the first house, it's an interesting situation for the moon because the moon kind of prefers to be in the 4th or the 7th. Because the moon likes to be night, it likes to be at night. And when the moon is in the first house, it's rising, it's coming into the day. This is why it's abhaya, and this is why it's balishta. This is why moon in the first house indicates fearlessness and indicates strength. Because it's symbolic of the mind not being timid, or the mind not trying to hide, the mind actually coming out into the open. So assertiveness, directness, honesty, that kind of strength, not feeling the need to hide, and that kind of fearlessness. And then Lakshmivan, you're probably going to be fortunate, and this is also going to mean beautiful. All kinds of the fortunes are the 6 types of fortunes. It doesn't just mean only money. It means money, and it also means beauty, and it also means intelligence, and some fame and stuff like that. So this is what happens if the moon is bright in the first house. But he says if it's dark in the first house, then it's the opposite. Because then you have a symbol of the mind. A bright moon in the first house is a strong moon coming into view. But a dim moon in the first house is a weak moon coming into view. So it symbolizes a weakened mind having an effect on the body and the physical life. So it would indicate unhealthy body, lack of concentration, lack of longevity, fearfulness, lack of assertiveness, and lack of opulences. Does it make sense to you? Let me know. What we'll do later is we'll look at people. And what we'll do also now is color these. I don't want that one. I want this one. We'll color these in. So we're going to have to say this one is yellow. Because I would tend to say, all right, this is what I'm going to say. Moon in the first house is good. Whoa, we can't use green. The moon in the first house is good. And the reason why but what about if it's dark? Well, that's something that he's just introducing the concept of you better check your context. You better check your surrounding conditions. So that should just affect every house. In other words, the brightness or the dimness of the moon should be a part of what you're thinking about for every house, not also to mention that the sign occupied by the moon should also be an important consideration in how you actually work out the details of what the moon's going to do in the first house. Let me check and see if you got questions on it. So Nathaniel, that kind of answers your question, right? The moon in the first house is good as long as the sun is far away. Basically, that's not the end of the issue. The basic issue is you have to take the moon in the first house concept, which is the mind and the emotions are coming into view. You have to take that concept and you have to modify it by the surrounding conditions. So first you have to understand the concept of the mind coming into view, so the mind and the body will be very connected. So that's going to have the mind is going to have a big effect on the health, the body is going to, on the appearance of the body, etc. So it's generally going to be good, but under certain circumstances it could be bad. What happens to someone? The moon is completely obscured. You have to consider it as a very dark moon. I don't know, really, when you start to ask specific questions, it starts to become almost counterproductive to answer, because if you're going to go into specifics, then you have to go all the way into specifics and look at all the specifics. All right. We go on to the second. Moon in the second house. The moon in the second, the person is important, emotionally aware, able to enjoy sensuality, and speaks expertly. I must not have the moon in the second. And speaks expertly but mysteriously. Okay? So, if the moon is in Dhanabhav, then the person is Adya, which means they're important. So, in other words, they're going to be the head of something or the leader of something. They're Antarvani, which means that they are aware of or conversant with what's going on in the inside of things. They are. Does this make sense or not? Because the moon is the mind, and the second house is what we know. So if the moon is in the second house, then the person should understand the mind. So they are emotionally aware, they're emotionally attuned, or depending on the flavor of it, by the phase or by the sign, they could be very occult or mystical because they're attuned to the inner workings of things. And then he says Vishaya, they're able to enjoy sensuality. Why? Because the second is the house of wealth and the moon is the planet of desires. So they should have good access to desirable stuff. And then the second is the house of speech. So the moon should affect the speech a bit here. The speech should be antarvani. They should be speaking in a way which is kind of difficult to understand, mysterious or sophisticated, complex, but expert, and they're talking about things which are subtle, sophisticated. So vikala, the last word in the thing is vikala. It can be vachi vikala, which means it's mysterious. See, kala means with a great art. And vikala can mean with a lack of art or with a superb art. As I always mention, the prefix V is very unusual. We don't have a similar prefix in English. So it can, the way I translate it here is it's putting this word with vachi. So it means they're vachi, they speak excellently, but vikala, with a kind of expertise that makes it difficult to understand sometimes. Or vikala, you could take it off on its own, and then it could mean that they have a defect. And it tends to mean like a physical defect. Now you can ask me which one is it? How come it's not certain? How come you don't figure out which one it is. It depends on the context. We'll bring the different things out. If there's no problem to the first house, and the first house is great, then it's highly unlikely that the moon in the second house would bring out a flaw in the body. But if the first house is a problem, then the moon in the second house could be the clincher. Make sense? Angel. Okay. Now I'll go to the third. What do you want to do? Tell me. First of all, let me color code this, and then I want you to tell me if you want to look at the people right away, or look at them all at the end. I'm kind of leaning to maybe we should look at them right away, when it's still fresh in our mind. So I would say moon in the second is quite good. So I'm going to give it the good color. Any opinions? And Fallon says end. Anybody else? I vote right away. We need one tiebreaker. Ross, I want to look at them right away. Right away. Okay, we got the tiebreakers for right away. Because I think it will help clarify also. Or at least it will bring out some of the nuances. So let me set that up. Oh yeah, it's set up. And let's go like that. We can look for moon in the first house. Let's check out moon in the first house first. Who's got this? Pierre Cardin, Priyanka Chopra, Oprah Winfrey, Amber Heard. This is actually misleading. Amber Heard. I don't know her birth time. So I just have a moon-based chart for her. So of course the moon is in the first. And then my friend. So look, Priyanka Chopra, Oprah Winfrey, Pierre Cardin. Let's take a look at Priyanka Chopra to see if it's bright or whatever. Well, look, actually, with Priyanka Chopra, what else is in her first house? This is what I mean about the context. It's her moon and Venus. See, with Priyanka Chopra, it's really like, bam, Dridha Tanu. The body is good. The body is nice. But look, her sun and moon are pretty close. But look at the other factors. It's right next to Venus, and it's in Gemini. And actually, it's in a house exchange with the first lord. This is what I mean by all the context has to be considered. What else? Pierre Cardin, I think he's very into the visuals of things. His moon is half full. Oprah, her moon is like a little bit waxing. All of them had waxing moons, though. Not all of them. Pierre Cardin had a waning moon, but it was half full. Half. It was still at half. And the Priyanka and Oprah, they have waxing moons that are a little bit dim. Oprah Winfrey also, the prevailing condition in Oprah Winfrey's is not just the phase of the moon, but the fact that it's in Sagittarius, which belongs to Jupiter and has the aspect of Jupiter. That's what I mean by you got to look at context. And then moon in second house. Lee Iacocca, Walt Disney, and Sadhguru. So one thing we said was wealthy sensualist, right? See, moon in the second house. Important, emotionally aware, able to enjoy sensuality, speaking expertly but mysteriously. Sadhguru, speaking expertly but mysteriously, emotionally aware. Antarvani, Sadhguru. Adya, Sadhguru, Oh, well, three of these people obviously are Adya, but especially Sadhguru. Walt Disney, Lee Iacocca are more the Vishaya and Sukhavan. So let's take a look at Sadhguru. Moon in the second house in Capricorn. So less sensuality to it. Whereas Lee Iacocca, moon in the second house in Taurus. So more sensuality to it. Lee Iacocca, very bright. Moon in the second house. Sadhguru, also it's at a trine to the sun. Waning but very bright, more than half bright. Interesting? I think it is. Good point, Zena. Was the moon conjunct or aspect Saturn in Oprah's chart? Let's see. Oprah was 1, house 1. The moon is... Oh, because you're asking because it's... No, it's not. It's 30 degrees, well, roughly 30 degrees away from Saturn. So Saturn is kind of blind to the moon. Can't have any effect on the moon. Okay, now let's go and look at the moon in the third house. This one. Moon in the third house. So hotye sabhratri pramadabala shauryoti kripana. So it means sabhratri means they have siblings. It may just mean that they have a lot of competitors. It's not guaranteed that their mother and father actually made brothers and sisters, but they definitely have many people in their life who act like brothers and sisters, which means they're competitors and peers, competitive peers. So Bhratri Pramada. Pramada means wanton or like intoxicated. Bala, strong. Shaurya. Shaurya, I will translate in this context as enterprising. And Atikripana means very selfish. So what's the third house? The third house, this same author really loved the sun in the third house, didn't he? But he's really not giving a very great... He's not giving the greatest description of the moon in the third house. Especially the last thing, Atikripana, very selfish. It's kind of like negative. So why is it again? He follows this basic principle that soft planets go good in soft houses and hard planets go good in hard houses. And the third is a hard house. It's a tough house. It's a house of strength, ambition, drive, desire, lust. It goes good with hard planets, the sun or Mars or Saturn. So, but the moon is a soft planet. So the significations of the third house kind of don't go great when it's occupied by a soft planet. So this gets it red. And then let's see if I can show you any examples. I happen to know the punchline here. Any examples of the moon in the third house? I actually have no examples. Out of everybody that I have, like in my known charts file, which isn't terribly large, but it's maybe 2 dozen, 3 dozen. I don't have anybody famous with the moon in the third house. I'm sure there are people, of course, but they're not on my list already. So they're probably not the kind of people that I find particularly interesting. Okay, Any questions? I can move on to the sixth statement, where he's going to do the fourth, fifth, and sixth. Nathaniel, but the moon is all about desire, so why is it not good in the third house? Because it's soft, so you'll get too much of it. And that's what atikripana means. Too selfish. So Dr. Architect says something like, I think I understand this question, like, well, what if you have the moon in the third house, but shouldn't you also consider the context? Yes, bingo, right, 100%, you win the prize. You should consider the context. It's not that the moon in the third house is the end of your life, nor is it that the moon in the second house means you're lotto. You won the lotto. You have to consider the context. Maybe the moon is in, for example, maybe it's in Capricorn in the third house. It's a harder moon. Or Aquarius in the third house, or maybe it's aspected by Mars in the third house. So these are you have to consider. Hitler doesn't have moon in the third house. Otherwise he'd be in here. Because he's in my known database. You must probably be thinking of maybe Hitler. Let me see, before I'm so confident about myself. Let's check Hitler. Senor Hitler. Moon is in the fourth. I bet you are thinking of Hitler with a sidereal. Now you're going to say, well, look, I mean, Hitler definitely should be moon in the third. See, tropical astrology is crazy. Look at the conditions of Hitler's moon in the fourth. It's next to it. It's exactly conjoined a debilitated planet and K2. All right. We'll move on. I got to get this out of the way. Okay, moon in the fourth. Sukhi bhogi tyagi suridi sasurid vahanayasha. The moon in the fourth is happy, fun, generous, has friends, wealth, and good reputation. So sukhi means basically happy. Bhogi I translated as fun because I couldn't think of another way of translating it. But bhogi means they're enjoying stuff. So they're kind of like a consumer, and they're consuming things and enjoying things. But then tyagi typically means the opposite of bhogi. So the moon in the fourth house is an interesting situation where they're sensual but generous. It signifies being happy because they are enjoying stuff, but it's not selfish enjoyment. It's generous enjoyment. They like to share the pleasure. Surit is the name of the fourth house, and so he says if the moon is in Surit, then it's Sasurit, and then you have friends. And you also have Vahana, which is wealth, or literally cars, but actually wealth. And Yasha, which means a lot of fame or reputation. So now, people, we already know Hitler is going to be one of the weirdos. The weird ones. Other people with moon in fourth. Go. A lot! Compare that with the people that with the moon in the third. So what does that tell you? Moon in the fourth is really dynamic. It's really powerful in the fourth house. Here the moon has Dikbala. It gets the power of its from its direction, from the cardinal direction. For better or for worse, it's going to be very powerful. So Candy Bar, the famous early days porno actress. Jim Morrison, the famous sexy rock star. Adolf Hitler, the famous Adolf Hitler. David Berkowitz, Richard Ramirez. We got a lineup. Adolf Hitler, David Berkowitz, Richard Ramirez. Then we had Herman Hesse, Malcolm X, Caitlyn Jenner, Leonardo da Vinci, Anais Nin, Michelangelo, Russell Brand, and my friend. So, there's some common themes. You can see a lot of materialism. For sure, you can see a lot of materialism or sensuality across these names. But then there's, of course, quite glaring differences, between Richard Ramirez and Leonardo da Vinci. And you do have Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. But there's glaring differences. So let's take a look. Let's pick... You tell me. You guys pick two names. The first two names that I get, we'll look at those two charts. Russell Brand and Richard Ramirez. Here's Russell Brand. Look, it's quite opposite from Hitler. He has the moon in the 4th house with Jupiter, like Hitler, but with Jupiter not debilitated, but with Mars, who's domicile. So he has the moon in the 4th house in Aries. Not so bright, but not so dim either. In good conditions. In pretty good conditions. Kind of getting a little bit more of an aspect from Saturn than we would want. And we would probably want. As I mentioned the other day, this is interesting because it's an exact flip from Angelina Jolie's chart. By the way, they're born on the same day, but with opposite ascendants. So that's Russell Brand, and then if we compare that to Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, like Hitler, his moon is in the 4th house, but it's conjoined a debilitated planet. And K2. Let me bring up Hitler's again. Hitler's moon in the 4th house conjoined a debilitated planet and K2. Richard Ramirez conjoined a debilitated planet and K2. Okay. Richard Ramirez, the moon is also the 8th lord. You have to kind of think about that. It's also the moon in the 4th house when Sagittarius rises is also the 8th lord in the 4th house. So if it goes wrong, it can go quite wrong. Whereas for Russell Brand, with the Capricorn ascendant, the moon in the 4th house is the 7th lord in the 4th house. So if it goes right, it can go quite right. Okay, I think that was good and interesting. Morrison, Taurus, aspected by Venus. Yeah, so this Nathaniel says, looks like moon conjoined with a debilitated planet in the 4th creates some very controversial people. Don't forget, it's not just with the debilitated planet, it's also with K2. These moons are historically bad. Richard Ramirez and Adolf Hitler. And Charles Manson is also, he's in the 10th house, but he has a mirror image of David Berkowitz, but in the 10th house. All right, let's move on and look at moon in the 3rd. I mean the 5th. And let's color code this. I'm going to color code this as good. Moon in the 4th house is good. It's going to make you, especially, it's definitely going to make you Adi, or prominent. And Yasha, famous. And Suki, Bogi, and all that stuff. Happy. Happy and sensual. But of course, anything can go wrong. But overall, out of the box, I'm going to say that it's good. So I'm going to give it a good color so we can remember. Now, if we take a look at 5th. Suputro Medhavi Mridugatir Amatya Sutagate. So if the moon goes to Sutabhava, the house of children, the 5th house, then you should have good Sutta. Suputra. Good children. Now, it doesn't have to only mean biologically good children. It could also mean you have good students. Or you teach people well. And that's also what Amatya means. Amatya means the advisor. So moon in the 5th house, the person is good at guiding people, advising people, teaching people. Hence they tend to become teachers or writers, things like that. And Medhavi, they have good Medasa, they have good intelligence. It's the house of intelligence, and the moon is the planet of concentration and mind. And then he has an interesting statement here, Mridu Gati. Gati means the way that you walk, or the way that you move. And Mridu means gently. So you can take this to mean graceful. But there's also implications of it, like walking softly, stuff like that, right? The implication is kind of they're gentle with people or tactful. Because the 5th house has a lot to do with how you communicate. And the moon in the 5th house can give you a lot of empathy behind your communication, which is useful for not being rude and being tactful or sensitive in how you communicate. So we're going to give this blue. And let's take a look at Peeps with the moon in the 5th. Trump, not tactful. Pablo Picasso, also not tactful. Charles Bukowski, also not tactful. But a writer. Pablo Picasso, also a communicator. Trump, a leader. Barack Obama, a leader. So what did he say again about this? Good children. Okay, Trump and Barack Obama, they're very into their family and their children. Intelligent. Okay, they all fit that. All three of these people fit that. Even if you think Trump is an idiot, his idiocy is so intelligent. So he's weird. Very unusual, but you can't really call him an idiot. Gentle gait. None of these people match that. But advisor or Amatya, definitely, especially Trump and Barack Obama, the presidents of the United States. Amatya is like the leader. So which two of these should we look at to figure out? You tell me. Picasso and Obama. You don't have to read the text. You're not really supposed to read that text. Let's look at Picasso. Picasso is moon in the 5th, right next to Rahu. And it's in Sagittarius. So this is probably why he does not have a gentle gate. Because Rahu is wild. So he's not going to have a gentle gate, but he actually has a very uber gentle gate in terms of how he's painting. With the painting thing, it's Venus and Libra in the third house. Can't get around that. That's obvious. Anything else about him? Sun in the fourth. We didn't like the sun in the fourth house. It's a soft house, and the sun is a hard planet. So that's a context that's gonna contradict anything that really goes. If you have something on in the fourth house, you should think about what effect it's going to have on the moon. Like how the moon sits on the same page or not on the same page with whatever's going on in the fourth house. Because they both symbolize the same things. But sensualist, definitely. Because he's got the 11th lord in the fourth house. And then Obama. Doesn't have it with anything, right? He's got a cleaner moon in the fifth house in Gemini. Compared to Picasso, it's cleaner, so it's a little bit more like, oh, okay. Also, he has Jupiter in his first house, so the part about children is easier to find support for. He's got nothing going on in his fourth house, so you don't have to think about that. Compare that to Picasso. Picasso was Jupiter in the 10th house with Saturn. It's not a dominant Jupiter. He's got Leo rising. And he's got Rahu right next to the moons. And he's got some stuff in his fourth house that doesn't match the moon. But Obama's is more clear. It's just a simple moon in the fifth house. So it's more like a textbook moon in the fifth house. Yeah, gentle gate does go with Obama. All right, any comments or questions? I mean, I'm just curious. Let me see Trump. Look. It's like Picasso and not like Obama. This is Picasso. This is Obama. This is Trump. You can see the similarity between Trump and Picasso, and you can see how it's dissimilar from Barack. Because former President Barack Obama doesn't have K2 there. But these two dudes, Picasso and former President Donald Trump, do. In fact, Senor Trump has the eclipsing moon. He has an eclipsed moon in the fifth house. So this really does match his very mysterious and difficult to grasp intelligence. Okay. Do afflictions to the moon in the Navamsha mean the same as in the Rashi? You just got lucky and that question happened to catch my eye because it's not on topic, but just remember what the Navamsha is and you answer your own question. The Navamsha is a subchart, so it will just provide context to the main chart. It doesn't set the context for the main chart. And that's as much of an answer as you're going to get today. Now, moon in the sixth. Oh, the poor moon in the sixth. Kshate. Did this come before? No. Kshatay Alpayus Chandre Matirudararogi Paribhavi. So bruised, kshata. You get bruises. Alpayu, short-lived. Amatir, not smart. Udararogi, stomach problems. Paribhavi, disrespectful. This is exactly the opposite from the sun. Sun in the houses. We had basically red, red, blue, red, red, blue, and moon in houses. Blue, blue, red, blue, blue, red. Simple principle, hard planets in hard houses are good. Soft planets in soft houses are good. Hard planets in soft houses are bad. Soft planets in hard houses are bad. So moon in the 6th house, it's a soft planet in a hard house. What do I mean hard? I mean the 6th house is for tough stuff. It's a tough house. So, kshate, you have bruises. Maybe it means you got boo-boos on your body, but it definitely means you got bruises. You get scarred easily. You bruise easily. You feel insulted easily. You feel saddened easily. You feel disrespected easily, etc. You get upset easily. Alpayus, you're not living for a long time. It also means you can't concentrate for a long time. Unintelligent, then maybe that comes from the lack of concentration. Or, to tell you the truth, where this is coming from, the 6th house is how you can solve a problem. How you can overcome a problem is the 6th house. So the moon doesn't do good in the 6th house because it's soft. So you'll be a little bit trying to take short solutions to long problems. Which, this is what he particularly means by amatir. Amati, not really knowing the right way forward. So solving problems in a lazy way. Or not having the patience and longevity to solve problems fully. To leave them before they're fully solved. Udararogi, well, if the moon is not doing good in the 6th house, then it should affect your digestion too. And paribhavi, it's hard to decide if this means disrespected or disrespectful. But since it's paribhavi, literally it means somebody who is being disrespectful. So the moon in the 6th house means the mind is focused on problems and enemies. So it tends to see people as an enemy or a problem. That's like its default. And so, hence, it's not being very respectful to people. It's being kind of combative with people. Are you ready to see people with the moon in 6th? Do you know anybody? Jewel, that's you? Jewel, you're not alone. Samurai Mama knows somebody. Moon in 6th. We have Jewel Fool. We have Bob Dylan. Disrespectful. Albert Einstein. Not unintelligent in that sort of way. Well, let's look at Einstein's. Joseph Goebbels. Woody Allen. Woody Allen and Bob Dylan are kind of the same flavor. Also, Einstein has something similar with these people. Vincent van Gogh. Joe Biden. One of my children. And me. Let's look at Albert Einstein. for a second. There he is, moon in 6th. So you're saying, man, Vedic astrology is stupid, or tropical astrology or whatever is stupid. Albert Einstein has moon in the 6th. Moon in the 6th is unintelligent. But yeah, that's fine if you want to be that stupid, then you can call other people stupid. Generally, stupid people call other people stupid. See, I have the moon in the 6th house. I'm very disrespectful. Wow, so what did I just say about myself? This is now my brain is exploding. So now the 5th house of Albert Einstein belongs to Mars, and Mars is aspecting the ascendant while exalted and in a Raja Yoga. How is it in a Raja Yoga? Because it's in a house exchange with the 7th Lord, its own Lord. Obviously, its own Lord. That's dumb. And the 8th Lord, which is particularly important for science. The 5th and the 8th are in a Raja Yoga. So see how important context is? Also, it's the 5th Lord in the 6th house, which isn't particularly bad. But Einstein was not a friendly person. Period. And this is one of the things to understand about the moon in the 6th house. Not particularly friendly. That's Paribavi. Anybody else you want to look at? Maybe I'll just quickly check out the Nazi. Joseph Goebbels is the 12th Lord in the 6th house. In Capricorn. Joseph Goebbels, you kind of... I almost got distracted. I almost lost the forest for the trees. But with Joseph Goebbels, if you're not talking about K2, then you missed the forest for the trees. Because look at K2 and look at his ascendant. And it's in Leo. So that's the deal with Joseph Goebbels. And let this be a lesson to us all about how to read charts. Don't miss a forest for a tree. If you start trying to interpret Joseph Goebbels' chart based around the fact that he has the moon in the 6th house, it's like trying to build a house starting with the roof. Or more accurately, it's like trying to build a house starting with a window. So you have to figure out what's the most dominant thing in the chart and base the reading of the chart on that. Let me see if you guys have anybody else you want to look at. Me. It's in Gemini. What can you say about it? Is it likely that the guy is unintelligent? Not in the sense of unintelligence, not in the sense of not being smart, because the 1st Lord's in the 5th house and the 5th Lord's in the 9th house. But probably in the sense of being lazy about solving problems. Is he friendly? Nah, he's very confrontational. How can you tell? Because he has a Capricorn ascendant. That's going to really support it. Because he has the sun in the 8th house. That's going to really support it. Because he has Mercury in Leo in the 8th house with Mars. So this part about being Paribavi is right on the money. So that's what you do when you have the Lego piece of some information that the moon in the 6th house signifies XYZ. Then you look at the rest of the chart, and where you'll see X is repeated a lot of times, then that's the thing that is for sure about the moon in the 6th house. When you see something that's the opposite of Z, then that's the part you can just disregard. Make sense? You got it, Ross. You got it. All right. We're going to move on to the moon in the 7th, which also is pretty awesome. Also, as if the moon in the 6th is awesome. Moon in the 7th. Let me see. Do I have the right thing up? Moon in the 7th. Smare drishte saumyo varayuvati kanto tisubaga. Beautiful to behold. Graceful. Very blessed with the beloved spouse. Smare drishte means it will infatuate your eyes. It will infatuate your vision. So it's beauty, attractive. Somya means graceful. It also means voluptuous. And Vada Yuvati Kanto Ati Subaga is kind of, you can break it into two different concepts, or you can keep it as one concept. I have it as one concept in the translation. Very blessed with a beloved spouse. Or if you break it into two concepts, people really, the opposite sex really loves them. And they're very fortunate. So let's give this a blue for being a good, basically a good, having a good base. The interpretive base for moon in the 7th house is good. And let's see. You know, Zena, I'm going to do something for you, because I think I understand now what you can't see. Let's do moon in the 7th. Bum ba-dum. The one that's the most like, see, this is the moon in the 7th house, is Marilyn Monroe. And then you Hefner, you can kind of put on the same general page. And then the one that's like the head scratcher is Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer. Maybe you could put maybe you could put Neil Armstrong around here too. I don't know. With Marilyn Monroe, not with Jeffrey Dahmer. But you have the Marilyn Monroe is like, wow, that's accurate. That's like crazy accurate. And then you have Jeffrey Dahmer is like, what? He's attractive? He's nice. He's soft. So let's look at those two, shall we? Why is Marilyn Monroe such a perfect example of the moon in the 7th house? Because, in fact, the first thing that jumps to my mind that's super important is because if you're talking about smare drishte, how beautiful the person is, you better check to see if the ascendant agrees with you or not. If the ascendant agrees with the moon being in the 7th house. And this ascendant surely does. Let's talk about why. The first thing is the moon in the 7th house is at 19 degrees and the ascendant is at 13 degrees. By the way, I looked ahead to the end of the chapter and I was very thrilled to see Mantreshwar verbatim say the same thing that I always say about the house cusp and the degree of the ascendant and how the planet will have the effect upon that house depending on how close it is to the ascendant degree within that house. So in this case, Marilyn Monroe's moon in the 7th house is quite effective because it's very close to 13 degrees. And since it's in the 7th house close to the ascendant degree, it will actually influence the ascendant. Along with Jupiter, who's a sexy lord for a Leo ascendant because it's the 8th lord and the 5th lord. Furthermore, the first lord is in the 11th house, Gemini, with the 11th lord Mercury. And icing on the cake is Venus in Aries. Ascendant is Ashlesha. Okay, so Marilyn Monroe, therefore, really meets this stuff. Well, she doesn't meet the part about marriage being successful, but if you broke it into if you thought of it the other way, as the opposite sex really loves her. And she's very fortunate. She made a lot of money out of nothing. And then Jeffrey Dahmer. Oh, look. This makes a bit of sense too. it also has a lot of effect on the first house and on the seventh house, but it's with Mars and Aries. In the context of it, the first lord is in the eighth house. And then he has this little problem too. A debilitated planet in the fourth house, which we found to be fairly disturbing in our studies so far today. Marilyn Monroe, first in the 11th with the 11th Lord. Jeffrey Dahmer, first Lord in the 8th house. This chart is a little bit mysterious until you start looking at what's dominating the ascendant. What's terribly dominating the ascendant? Saturn. Much more than the moon. And then it's also really getting confluence from Mars, also has a very strong aspect on the ascendant. Okay. So this is what? Moon in the 7th. According to Phaladeepika. Yeah, it could help. But I mean, Moon, first Lord in the 8th with a debilitated planet in the 4th is the same combination that Hitler has. Is Rohini sexy? It is very. Dhanishta is very sexy. Fatima, you got that right. The top 5 sexy nakshatras: Ashlesh, Rohini, Revati is good. I don't know. I don't really have it stored in my memory banks. Let's go on. Moon in the 8th. Now he does this weird thing. He's going to put two houses on one line. I had to stick on this translation for a long time to be confident, but there's no other way to see it. So he's going to call the 8th house Mtao, the death house, and he's going to call the 9th house Shubha, the auspicious house, and put them all in one line. So for the 8th house, he says Mtao Rogya Alpayus Tapasi. And for the 9th, he says Shubha Dharmat Masutavan. So Moon in 8th, he says ill, short-lived, and ascetic. And Moon in the 9th, he says it's a responsible and moral person who has children. Fascinating. Rogi means ill. Man, I just realized that the English word rogue has got to be cognate to this Sanskrit word rogue. So I want to try to find out. Because Moon in the 8th and the concept of rogue, English word rogue, really does match. So maybe I should look into the etymology of that. Alpayus, short-lived, or also bad. Short concentration or giving up on one thing to pursue another. And the other interesting thing is tapasi, ascetic. Means like occulty, spiritual type. Let's see who's got Moon in the 8th. So what would you say? I'm going to say this is middle of the road. Or as far as just getting a general feeling for what this is like. So then let's go over here. Moon in 8th. Who do we know? Carl Sagan, Benito Mussolini, and Steve Jobs. I'll zoom on that. Carl Sagan, Benito Mussolini, and Steve Jobs. Let's look at, okay, what was it again? Just read it. Ill or rogue? See, I think the rogue is very good. Rogue. And then short-lived. Okay, all three of them. And then tapasi, ascetic. Especially Carl Sagan. Scientists are ascetics. Modern ascetics. Let's take a look at Carl Sagan and Benito. My childhood hero, Carl Sagan. It's kind of a simple, clear moon in the 8th house. Nothing really clogging it up. And it's in Sagittarius. So the ascetic thing comes out more than the rogue part. Very sciencey. Because his first lord is also in the 8th sign, and his 5th lord is also in the 8th sign, and Jupiter is also in the 8th sign, and Sun is also in the 8th sign. 8th house is very sciencey, especially philosophical science. And then if we look at Benito, see, this is not very clean and clear. Carl Sagan was just the opposite sign of Sagan, Gemini. Look, it's flanked on one side by Saturn and on the other side by Mars. So that explains a lot. And then 9th house. Two people that I have in my lookup file. Aretha Franklin and Pope John Paul II. Well, that makes sense. Pope John Paul has the moon in the 9th house. Dharmatma. They're very interested in Dharma or religion. That's another way of saying responsible moral person is you could just translate it as religious person. Sutavan, Pope John Paul, had children? Yeah, he's the father. Pope means father. Papa. So it doesn't always just mean literal children. It can mean followers or students. What is it in Pope John Paul that made him so religious? It's clear, see? It's clear and clean by itself. And then he's got a packed up 8th house without malefics. So the tapasi, the ascetic nature of the 8th, is also a part of his context. But he does have a dominant Mars. All right. From here, let's look at the 10th, 11th, and 12th because we're overtime. Are we not? Yes, quite. 10th, Jai Siddharambo Nabasis Shubhakrit Sat Priyakara. So he very much likes the moon in the 10th house. He says successful, completes their projects, does good deeds that benefit good people. Jai means successful. Siddharamba means what they start. Aramba, they finish Siddha. Nabasi is the name of the 10th, and Shubhakrit means they do good things. Satpriyakara, that benefit good people. Or they do good things following the example of good people. Now let's see moon and 10th peeps. So moon and 10th looks nice and blue, which is our color code for good. Moon and 9th, of course, was also good. And who do we got? Who can be our poster child for the moon in the 10th house? Surprise, surprise, a lot of people. So look at what we learned. Moon in the 4th produced a lot of very significant people, and so did the moon in the 10th. It's because if you get the moon in the 10th, any planet in the 10th, it's prominent, and it's good to have a big old bright planet be prominent. And if you get the moon in the 4th, then it has Digbal, and it's right exactly where it likes to be. So moon in the 10th people, Angelina Jolie. You want to zoom in on this. L. Ron Hubbard, Angelina Jolie, Salvador Dali, Bill Gates, Charles Manson, Edgar Cayce, Bernard Madoff, Ramana Maharshi, and 2 members of my family. So we're overtime. But just look at Angelina. It's the exact opposite of Russell Brand's chart. So it's in the 10th house with the 10th Lord, Mars, as the first Lord in a Raj Yoga with the 9th Lord. So it's going to be all the great potential of the moon in the 10th house can be easily interpreted here, because everything else is great. Not that this chart is not without problems, but everything with the moon in the 10th house certainly has a lot of good things going with it. Now, moon in the 11th. Manasvi Bhavya Bahu Ayu. Manasvi Bhavayu Dhanatanaya Brityai Sahabhave. Thoughtful person, lives a lot, has wealth, offspring, and employees. So I chose my words carefully here. Thoughtful for Manasi. So it can mean intelligent, but it also, because 11th is for interactions with other people. If the moon is here, it's kind of similar to... Let me scroll up and find out. Second and 4th. It's kind of similar with 2nd and 4th, that it thinks about people. It has its mind on other people. And the 7th as well. Bahu Ayu means a lot of life. So this is also important. It seems to mean that they live a long time, but Bahu Ayu, sure, it means they have a lot of life, but it means they pay a lot of attention. They're very eager about things. They're vivacious. They have vitality. They have a lot of life. They like to live. And then Dana, they have money. Tana, they have children, because moon is mother. And Britya, they have people helping them. They have employees. So what do we got? So this is good. Let's take a quick look at who's got it. John Lennon is a pretty good example. LeBron James and Mahatma Gandhi. Thoughtful, lives a lot, has wealth, offspring, and employees. And then let's finish up with the 12th. Moon in the 12th. Yikes. Vyaye dveshyo dukhi sashini paribhuto lasatama. They are, if you go to Vyaya, if the moon goes to Vyaya, if Shashi goes to Vyaya, then they're dveshya, which means inimical. So it's opposite of Manasi or Manasvi. Manasvi is thoughtful about other people because the moon is in the 11th house, where the 11th house is for your friends, your contacts. The 12th house is for people you don't know. You're probably your enemies. So if the moon is in the 12th house, then that's the way you see the world. Basically, the house that the moon occupies is pretty much the way you interpret the world. If the moon is in the 6th house, you interpret the world as one big problem. If the moon is in the 12th house, you interpret the world as one big foreigner. People you don't know and you can't really trust. If the moon is in the 11th house, you interpret the world as kind of a friendly place. So you should be friendly towards them. So that's what inimical means. The world seems like it's not trustable. Dukhi, sad. The emotions are in the 12th house. They're not very vivacious. They get sad. Paribhuto. Similar with the 6th house. 6th was paribhavi. The 12th is paribhuta. And when in the 6th or 12th, it sees the world as a kind of inimical or problematic place. And so it finds problems and enemies in the world. We will experience what we look for in life. And then alasatama means lazy, procrastinating. The moon in 12th is kind of tired. Oh, I know somebody who has moon in 12th. It's Elizabeth Taylor. She has quite an interesting moon in 12th. Why don't we look at hers? So this gets a red flag. And you can see this pattern. This is the pattern that basically any gentle planet will have. Any gentle planet will basically have good effects in the Kendras and good effects in 5, 9, 11, and 2. And negative effects in 3, 6, 12, and kind of iffy effects in 8. And this will be the pattern for any of the tough malefic planets. It will be the opposite. And now, as for the people, moon in the 12th. Oh, more than you might expect. Giorgio Armani is a fashion designer. Enrico Fermi is a big physicist. Elizabeth Taylor, everybody knows who that is, I hope. Tracy Lords, probably more of you know who that is than should. And Nicholas Copernicus, I hope nobody doesn't know who Nicholas Copernicus is, especially if you're into astrology. Nicholas Copernicus was the guy who figured out how to actually figure out where the planets were going to be without making a mistake. Look how long it actually took. Nicholas Copernicus' birthday is what? 1400s? 1473. Look how long it actually took before we nailed the math for knowing exactly where the planets would be without fail. It took 1473 plus years or more from when we started trying to do it. And then you wonder why there's constellations in the sky that are called Aries and Taurus. Because when we started out trying to figure out where planets are in things that we can't see, that are anchored to things that cannot be seen. At night, when you can see a planet, you cannot see how long the day is. You can see how long the day is during the day. You can see how long the night is during the night, but you can't see it in the sky. You can't put a position to it relative to the planet. So we had to do everything by math. In order to use the zodiac, you have to do everything by math. In order to use the nakshatras, you can do it more or less by vision. You do need math to be accurate, but you can more or less guess by vision. So this is what we used to rely on all the time, was the nakshatras. But around 2,000 years ago, the math started to work. We started to get enough math and enough proficiency in math and astronomy that we could say, and why did we say this is Aries. See, that's because we had to make visual things so that we could test to see if our math was right or wrong. So we had to make a visual correspondent of the zodiacs to a star so that when we calculate where a planet is, we can measure the actual angle to that star and see if it really is in Libra. But look at how difficult it was to do that. It wasn't until Nicholas Copernicus that they actually got it right. 1473. So he has Moon in the 12th house. What is he supposed to be? Lazy? He's probably not that lazy with a Virgo ascendant. Right? So remember the context. He's supposed to be inimical. So he probably is. That's what makes a scientist. He's doubtful. He's skeptical. He's probably another reason why he's probably not lazy is you're probably not lazy if you have an aspect from Mars. You probably have passion if your moon has an aspect from Mars. And then his Mercury is with Venus in Raj Yoga, Nichbang Raj Yoga in the 7th house. So you're probably not going to get bad results, able to fully fructify. Because the first lord is in a Nichbang Raj Yoga with the 9th lord. And the 5th lord. As for the intelligence, the ascendant is Virgo, and the 5th lord is the highest planet. So that's Nicholas. And Elizabeth Taylor, this is why she's a diva. It's a debilitated moon in the 12th house. So she has all kinds of stuff going on in the 4th house, making Raj Yogas, and the thing, remember who was it? I can't remember the example we did today. It was one of these people I said, if you're not seeing this K2, as Joseph Goebbels, if you're not seeing the K2, then you're missing the forest for the tree. With Elizabeth Taylor, there's a little something in here that if you're not seeing it, whatever else you're looking at, you're missing a detail. You're mistaking a detail for a foundation. The foundation of this chart is that the ascendant is at 13 degrees. And the 3rd lord is 9 houses away at 15 degrees. So it's a multiple of 120 degrees away. And it's Jupiter who has 100% aspect on that trine, 120 degrees. So the 1st lord is getting exactly aspected by the first house is getting exactly aspected by the 1st lord from the 9th house. And it's also exactly trying to Venus, the 11th lord, in the 5th house. So Venus will also aspect quite strongly the ascendant and Jupiter and get aspected by that. So that's really what Elizabeth Taylor's chart is entirely built on, is that trine between Venus and the 1st lord and the ascendant. The rest of it is icing, like little details. So her moon in the 12th house is not the foundation of her chart. It's a detail about it. Again, her ascendant is Jeshta. You were asking about sexy nakshatras. Her Jupiter is in Ashlesha. The 1st lord is in Ashlesha. Her Venus is in Revati. All right. It was a good time. We did an hour and a half. And I think you guys do well speaking to yourself, speaking to each other. So I'm going to just split after spending 90 minutes. So thank you so much. Thank you.